Hi, Acadiana. Meteorologist Dave Baker here on a Friday afternoon, getting ready for a big weekend. We've got a brand new hurricane. Our first hurricane of the 2025 season is Erin. It got that update at 10 o'clock, and then a lot of folks getting a little concerned about 98L over the southwestern Gulf near the Bay of Campeche. Good news is the recon aircraft went and checked it out a little bit earlier today. They did not find any close center of circulation, so because of its proximity to land, it really doesn't have a whole lot of time to become a tropical depression. So this is pretty much going to be a rainmaker over deep south Texas and northern Mexico through the Rio Grande Valley. And at this point, it doesn't look like we're really going to see any effects from this particular system. So some good news there. And then also it looks like things are going to quiet down, at least for the rest of the weekend, outside of those two areas that we're looking at in the Atlantic Basin this time around. It is a hot one here in Lafayette. Partly cloudy skies at my house, 92 with a heat index at 104. There is thunder in the distance, though. Dew point at 76, relative humidity 60%. Our winds are currently out of the west-northwest at 8, and the pressure is at 30.10. And as you can see, there is quite a bit of rain developing, especially over the eastern half of the southern part of Louisiana. A lot of this is generally along and south of the I-10 corridor, although there are some little showers that have popped up over central and northern parts of Acadiana. We're getting some decent downpours here across parts of northern Vermilion, getting into Lafayette Parish and over St. Martin and eastern parts of St. Mary, Iberia, lower St. Martin covered with the rain. Fortunately, things not popping up quite as much up here in central Louisiana. Our friends up in Rapides Parish really got some heavy rain with a little bit of flooding late yesterday evening, and some of that extended down into parts of Allen and Evangeline Parish. And then as we look a little bit farther to the east, we'll go ahead and grab the Hammond radar there, and you can see that we've got widespread rains there south of the I-10 corridor there, going through parts of Ascension Parish and then pushing down toward the coastal areas as well, St. James, St. John parishes as well. And some of that's going to be pushing up into portions of Livingston Parish and East Baton Rouge as well. So keep that in mind if you've got to do some traveling this weekend. Some folks might be taking a trip off toward the east. If you're going toward New Orleans or if you're going toward the North Shore, you are going to run into some problems with the rainfall there. Locally, we're in pretty good shape, though, at least on some of the interstates here. Looks like Breaux Bridge and Henderson still have some sunshine, a little more cloud cover there over toward I-10 at Louisiana Avenue. And we've seen a little bit of light rain coming down over toward Ambassador Caffrey just a little while ago, but that looks like it's cleared up. But we are going to see those scattered showers and thunderstorms out there as we go into the afternoon. Better chances will be east of us, lesser rain chances the farther west you go. So let's start with the national picture. And again, we've got more of a ridge of high pressure that's going to start to build in here for the weekend. That's kind of over here in the upper levels, and that's going to be strengthening. So that should help to suppress some of the chances for rain as we go into the weekend. And then, of course, down here we've got 98L, which is very, very close to the Texas-Mexican coast right now. And over the last several hours, we've had a recon aircraft take a trip out there to do some investigating, and they didn't find any closed circulation. So the area that's most concerning is right on the coast right now. So at this point, it's pretty much run out of real estate to do any development. And as far as any boating, that's not going to be affecting us locally. We're going to be seeing southerly winds about 10 knots, seas 2 to 3 feet. But remember, there will be some higher winds and seas out there due to the numerous thunderstorms, especially out there in the offshore waters. But this is a visible satellite here. And again, the areas that they were watching were right there at the mouth of the Rio Grande River. It is going to spread some thunderstorms maybe off toward the northeast, but as far as anything developing into a tropical system, it just really doesn't seem very likely right now. And any of the tropical models have the entire system on land within 24 hours. So again, not very concerned about this locally, but for our friends down in the Rio Grande Valley, this is going to be a significant rainmaker. And of course, flooding, especially over the state of Texas, has been kind of top of mind. So there's a lot of folks that will be concerned about the amount of moisture continuing to move on in. And as far as it becoming anything here, again, the next several days, and even yesterday's intensity guidance really didn't show anything going up to tropical depression. And that's pretty much unchanged for today. But it is a reminder that sometimes things can kind of whip up there a little bit quicker, especially there across the Gulf of Mexico. And I believe it was Humberto back in 2007. if I'm correct, was the one that developed right off the coast of Texas, a little bit closer to us, and went from, a little disturbance like what we're seeing here with 98L and went into, became a hurricane in about 18 hours. So that's why I'm always saying you got to be hurricane ready, even though we really tend to focus on a lot of the stuff taking the long route all the way across the Atlantic. Occasionally you get a little homegrown system, and those can whip up fairly quickly. So it's always best to have all of this taken care of well ahead of hurricane season and well ahead of any tropical systems that might come in our direction. Let's take a real quick tour. Another pretty day over in Panama City Beach. Look at how blue and beautiful the skies are and the water as well. And then just a little bit farther off toward the west at Orange Beach, they got a massive thunderstorm happening right now. And you can see that some of that rain is extending over toward the west, over toward Dauphin Island. Not raining here on this camera, but you can see the thunderheads off in the distance. Lumcon camera down again today over in Cocodrie, so we'll skip over to that and we'll go over toward Galveston. So our friends out there in the west, seeing some thunderstorms starting to billow there out over the Gulf waters. So, again, a pretty day there around the Galveston area, but you too will start to see some of those scattered showers and thunderstorms. So earlier when we had 98L, when it was crossing over the Yucatan and Honduras, it kind of started right about in that particular area. And right now we've got another bit of a tropical wave that's kind of working off toward the west. So we'll keep an eye on that as it moves toward the Yucatan and perhaps over toward the Bay of Campeche toward the early part of next week, but we're not really expecting anything to happen with that one right now. But that was our thinking with 98L about 4 or 5 days ago. So we'll just keep an eye on that. And then, of course, across the main part of the Caribbean, things are relatively quiet, except for some thunderstorms there south of the Dominican Republic. And then the big player out there is going to be Hurricane Erin. Erin made hurricane status during the 10 o'clock advisory, and we are looking at those the conditions that's going to become a lot more favorable perhaps for this to intensify. And we do expect this to be a major hurricane, which is Category 3 or higher. So that puts the wind speeds up above 111 or higher. And when you got a Category 3, it becomes a major hurricane. So you can see right now there is a little bit of Saharan dust kind of wrapped around it, and it is affected a little bit by some wind shear. So we'll focus more on Erin here in just a little bit, but just real quick so that we can get through the weekend looking off toward the east. There are a couple of tropical waves out there, but they're not looking too interesting. A couple of complexes of thunderstorms that will move across Central Africa, and I think those might come into play a little bit toward maybe the end of next week or the following week. So I think things are going to quiet down at least for a couple of days. So all we've got out there is Erin, which is now a hurricane, and then what's left of 98L, which virtually has no chance for development now, that it'll be moving over land. So let's focus in here on Erin. And remember a couple of days ago, Erin was spinning out there, had a great surface circulation, but really didn't have any kind of convection around it. Part of that was because the air mass was dry. Another part of it was because it was moving west at such a fast clip that it wasn't able to wrap those thunderstorms around. So now it's slowing down just a little bit. It's moving into an area where the waters are considerably warmer. There's a little bit more heat content, which means that those warm waters go deep below the surface. And there's also going to be a little less wind shear as it moves off toward the west. So all of the forecasts are indicating that we're going to see strengthening, and therefore the possibility of this becoming a major hurricane. Now, the track models and the cone still keeps this away from the northern Caribbean islands, although tropical storm watches have been posted there for the northern Leeward Islands, and that's why we get these updates every 3 hours now instead of every 6. Whenever there's any kind of a watch or warning, even if it's just one island, you start to get the updates every 3 hours. So we're going to get a new update on Erin coming up at 1 o'clock later on this afternoon. But it is still forecasting a pretty decent curve, hopefully staying away from the Bahamas. I wouldn't let your guard down yet at the Bahamas. I think the southeastern coast of the United States is relatively safe with the exception of maybe the Outer Banks of North Carolina. At this point, Bermuda is also kind of out of the crosshairs, but there could be changes. So the folks over in Bermuda really want to pay attention to this as well. And all the intensity forecasts have this already as a hurricane and have it kind of increasing up to maybe a Category 3, Category 4. You've got at least one model that's calling for a Category 5 hurricane a little bit farther down the road. That would be over water and wouldn't be affecting anyone. So with these intensity levels, I know that looks a little bit scary, but the fortunate thing is that most of our determinations deterministic models. And again, these are several different model runs, different kinds of models, different mathematical equations, and each one of those produces one forecast. So each one of these lines is a different model producing just one forecast. So we're looking at about 10 different forecasts here. And they're all lined up on top of each other very, very nicely north of the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. And then you start to see a little bit of divergence as you get out here to about day 5. They spread out a little bit more, and that's where you start to get more of that uncertainty. Now, compared to a lot of tropical systems that I've seen in the past, 5 days out, these are really consistent because you can have some crazy solutions from model run to model run. But when we go with the ensemble models, and remember the ensemble, this is the Euro model, so it's the same model that runs over and over and over again. But the models, or at least we know that there's going to be some changes in the forecast at any given time between now and 10 days out. So what the ensemble suite does is it runs the same model over and over and over again with just a little tweak here and there to kind of take into consideration the what ifs. So all of those lines outside of the black line pretty much are the what ifs. And you see some that kind of stretch their way to the west. Some of them stretch their way to the east. You got one outlier that kind of grazes the North Carolina coastline, but the bulk of the action is staying out over water, which is good news, although Bermuda is starting to get a little bit more into some of those lines there. And the same thing with the GFS. This is more the American model, again, running over and over and over again. These are your number of what ifs, just like you would see with the other model. And fortunately, most of them stay out over the water, but you do see there's a little bit more of a spread as you get out 4 and 5 days. This is a 10-day forecast, so if you cut that about in half, you start to see that spread there over the Western Atlantic north of the Bahamas, which would take into consideration some of the spread that you're going to see in the hurricane cone, in the forecast cone. So there is some uncertainty there beyond 5 days. And that's usually typical when we're doing hurricane forecasting. Usually the track models are pretty consistent for day 1, 2, and 3, and then they start to diverge a little bit more. To tell you the truth, it's the intensity forecasting that really, really is the tough part when it comes to hurricane forecasting. Water temperatures. And Corey Andrus, I see you put a question down there in the chat there earlier. Yeah, stay hydrated. That is a very good idea. Temperatures in the Gulf are quite warm. Water temperatures are upper 80s right now. Air temperatures are probably hovering around 90 and with dew points close to 80. Those Gulf temperatures, the air temperature probably feels more like about 105 out there. But those water temperatures across much of the Gulf are upper 80s to near 90 degrees. I know these numbers are in Celsius, but anything that's over 26 is above 80 degrees. So you can see pretty much everything that's on this map would be able to support tropical weather based on just the sea surface temperatures. But there's also a large area of heat content, and what heat content is not just the measurement of the temperature at the surface of the ocean, but also the temperatures going below. And the hotter those temperatures are and the deeper those temperatures go, the more heat content you have. And of course, it's off the charts there just west of Jamaica. But with Erin is starting to get into those areas that are a little bit more favorable when it comes to our water temperatures, but also it could tap into a little bit of this heat content, especially here. If it gets a little bit closer to the Carolina coastline, we could see some increased intensification there. And when you see tropical systems run over some of these eddies of very warm water with a lot of heat content, sometimes you'll see rapid intensification. That is not in the forecast for Erin, but if Erin, let's say, were to be traveling across maybe the northern Caribbean rather than the western Atlantic, we would be a lot more concerned about the possibility of rapid intensification and a very intense hurricane. We're already talking about a very intense hurricane, but if the track were to go a little farther to the south and run over some of that heat content over the northern Caribbean, we could be talking about an extreme type of a storm. Now, there is some wind shear that's still affecting Erin right now. I think that is going to lighten up here over the next couple of days. So again, that's kind of the third thing that we're looking at where that would favor some strengthening over the next couple of days. So higher water temperatures, higher heat content, and also less wind shear. And it's also a little bit more of a moist atmosphere. So some of those thunderstorms that are wrapping around the center will be able to sustain themselves. And when you get that solid ring of thunderstorms around the core of the system, then the core can really grow because it's protected. Wind shear can open up that center, open up and expose the core, and that's where you start to see a tropical system weakening. So with less wind shear, you can see more of a vertically stacked center that's a lot more protected and not exposed, and therefore the engine can really start running, and that's when you're going to be seeing some of the intensification. So real quick, we'll just go over some of the deterministic models. We'll start with the Euro model. And the Euro model, again, this is only one solution. This isn't like the ensembles that produces a whole bunch of what ifs. But as we get into the weekend, this is now Sunday going into the early part of Monday. You see it bypasses the Bahama Islands, but it is pretty close there. So there's going to be some rough seas, maybe some coastal erosion. Those islands don't have a lot of elevation. Puerto Rico it has a little bit more elevation, but as you get into the Bahamas, you don't really get a lot of elevation there. And then as we go into the mid and latter part of next week. So this right here, as I'm swinging back and forth, is like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You see it gets kind of close to the Carolina coastline. Not enough to do any damage, but it would bring some strong winds to the Outer Banks and probably some coastal erosion as well as some rough seas. And then quickly it goes ahead and moves back out to sea. Let's go ahead and grab the GFS just for fun. And let's see, we get back here to today. See, that's Thursday. There's today. That's where we are right now. And the GFS over the course of the weekend shows significant strengthening, but again, staying north of Puerto Rico and north of the Bahamas, and then curving a little bit farther to the east of the U.S. East Coast. But that becomes a little bit more of a danger for the island of Bermuda, which if you can't really see it, and actually I'm having a hard time seeing it here, it's right about there is the island of Bermuda. So that is going to be pretty close, and that's why folks on the island of Bermuda really need to pay attention to this, because some forecasts get it really close to you, and when you're isolated out there, that could be a rough go, and then quickly it moves off toward the northeast. But I want you to also notice as we go beyond 10 days, you see another system kind of coming in there. I'm not going to go much farther than that, but the GFS is indicating maybe something coming in behind that would try to roll in as we go into the latter part of the month or September. Now, again, this is so far out, so we're really going to kind of disregard that second thing. But as we go into the middle part of next week, we'll have a better idea if there's going to be a second type of system coming in. But the GFS, at least as I'm looking here, is the only one that's showing that. So the Canadian model shows Erin doing the same thing, perhaps moving north of the islands, but getting very close to Bermuda and then sliding off toward the northeast. And as we pull it out a little bit farther, you can see maybe there's another system out there in the Atlantic. But the Canadian model only goes out 10 days, so we can't see any farther than that. And let me finish off here with the Icon model. And the Icon has it a little bit closer to the Bahamas and a little bit closer to the U.S. East Coast, making its way away from Bermuda. And then as we go out to day 7, it's not far enough out to indicate if there's going to be anything farther into the Atlantic. But it is hurricane season, and we are getting to the peak of the hurricane season, so that is the time that you need to be watching out for some of that. So the Eurotropical Formation forecast, this is for next week. Of course, we already know Erin is going to be swinging its way near the Bahamas and near the East Coast. So what you're seeing here along the East Coast in that 90 to 100% chance here, that is because of Erin. But you can see there's a little bit more action out here, and this is showing 60 to 70% that there's going to be another tropical system. And this could be any strength. This could be a tropical depression, a tropical storm, or a hurricane between the days of August 18th and August 25th. So August 18th is Monday, and then the 25th is the following Monday. So perhaps we may have something else to watch as we go into next week. And that wouldn't be surprising, because that's pretty much where a lot of our tropical systems do form or pass by during the month of August. And of course, as we cruise our way through August and get into September, the number of storms really increases. We normally see about 3 to 4 named storms in August, and usually about 4 during the month of September as well. So we are really starting to get into the busy season, and we're now just slightly behind schedule, because normally we would see our first hurricane on or about August the 11th, and our first hurricane formed today on August the 15th. So still running on pretty much what I would consider a normal hurricane season. All of the forecasts were showing for a slightly above normal, somewhere in that 15 to 17 range of named storms. And for a normal season, we usually see about 14. So again, really don't have anything to worry about this weekend. We'll continue to watch Erin more for entertainment because it's so far away. And this is expected to be more of a major hurricane here over the course of the weekend. And then we'll kind of fine tune everything for next week to see if it's going to mess with the Bahamas or Bermuda. Right now, the U.S. East Coast is relatively safe, but of course the U.S. East Coast can't let its guard down yet. And then we'll have to wait and see if one of those tropical waves that comes off of Africa produces something new like what's being suggested in the GFS pretty far down the road. Well, I hope you enjoy Let's Talk Tropics. If you do like this video, subscribe to my channel, turn on those notifications too, and don't forget you can hear my forecast weekdays on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. And for any updates on Erin over the course of the weekend, you can follow my social media pages, both on Facebook and X. And if anything crazy comes along, we'll probably kick in a live show on Acadiana Weather Today. Not anticipating that for the course of the weekend. Need a little bit of a break. But if there will be, you go ahead and subscribe to Acadiana Weather Today. You'll get an alert knowing that a new video has dropped. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Have yourself a fantastic weekend, and I will talk to you on Monday.